So, I may be in a bit of a minority here, but does anyone else miss when games were just weird? This may seem like an odd thing to say at the start of a video, but I've noticed that less and less games are willing to take that kind of chance on being completely strange and just out there as fuck. We get some every now and again, certainly, but it honestly feels like so little when you look back at the 90s and early 2000s. Remember just how bizarre some of these titles were. Things like Jet Set Radio, Psychonauts, Billy Hatcher, so on and so forth. But the one we're going to talk about today, and one of my personal favorites, is the RPG for the SNES known as Earthbound. The cult classic itself, baby. This actually won a Twitter poll recently between this and the Kingdom Hearts 2 video, and either way I'm happy to talk about it because it's a game I enjoy quite a bit, and I've actually been interested in bringing it up for a while. Time for my channel to have some weirdness on it. Without further ado, let's get into it. So starting off good and strong, I'd like to talk about what I believe is the single strongest aspect of Earthbound. And that's just how out there and plain old kooky it's willing to be with just everything. Unlike a lot of RPGs out there that tend to try to tell stories in a medieval land, taking itself as seriously as possible, here in Earthbound they basically just say, fuck that. We're battling robotic aliens and a colorful parody of America. Serious dialogue that delve deeply into the characters' insecurities. Nah bro, tons of humor and clever puns galore. Battles with orcs and goblins. Nah, fuck that. Let's throw as much shit as we can to fight at Ness and Friends. Earthbound takes the RPGs that were coming out during that era and instead dives in a different direction that's such an out there approach to them all that gave the game a feeling of, you're not really going to find this on pretty much any other game on the Super Nintendo. But that level of difference may also have been what turned it into more of a cult classic, as it wasn't really following the trends that other RPGs were. But it does make me happy to see that the game is getting a lot more praise nowadays in comparison to back then. And that weirdness was really transferred over to the enemies as well. So how about we talk about the combat of the game? It's honestly really good. If a bit on the standard side, but that's not exactly what makes it so good to me. And that's not exactly a bad thing either, as it's still very fun to play. You have 4 party members, each can attack, defend, or use items, and some characters have their own abilities to utilize. Ness is a nice all-rounder, Paula works as the healer, Jeff is a dorky nerd with a cool item use ability that's very similar to the ninja job from Final Fantasy, and Pooh, yes, that is his actual name, is a very heavy hitter with both attacks and psi abilities, or PSI if you want to be that guy. Alongside this combat is the very interesting mortal hit system. You see, unlike a lot of other turn-based RPGs where it's a lot of, I hit you, that number appears, therefore you lose that much health. In Earthbound, if you get hit, you can actually use an item or a healing spell to not only get that health back, but actively stop the damage from going down more. It's a cool system that rewards split-second decision-making taken by the player to ensure safety by letting you lower the overall damage you ended up taking. Kind of a shame the Mother series is one of the only series I know of that actually tried this mechanic, as this mortal damage concept could work real well in a lot of other turn-based RPGs. But to be honest, while those are all great, that isn't my favorite part of the combat. No, that goes strictly to the enemies you fight. Now, unlike a lot of other RPGs that try hard to adhere to a certain style of enemy, an example of this is Final Fantasy sticking to a mix of medieval and sci-fi. Earthbound takes normal enemy conventions and just veers off course into places you don't expect. Oh, what, were you fighting wild animals and gang members? Fuck that, now you're fighting sentient mushroom creatures. What, that's not enough? Well, now you have cult members. Oh, did you think that was all? Oh, well, here's some undead beings. What, that's not stalking enough? Oh, I know, how about you fight a literal pile of vomit? Was that not enough? Okay, you get my point. Earthbound was so completely unafraid to get as goofy, weird, and silly as possible with its enemies that it ended up making every single new encounter so memorable, which is something that several series, even ones that I absolutely love, struggle to achieve with if I'm being totally honest. Now as for story and characters, they're alright. Outside of its goofy moments, it's a simple build a team to save the world story, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Sure, its characters aren't really blowing anyone away, but the gameplay, zany humor, and colorful and timeless 16-bit graphics are more than enough to carry its rather simplistic story. And of course, it's also held up great by a wonderful soundtrack. So many tunes in this game are just so memorable once you hear them. I love the opening theme myself, the battle theme is great, the remembrance theme when you get to the 8 sections that you have to go to gain the power to fight the final boss is so timelessly charming. I'm sorry if this is weird, I'm kind of new to talking about music in games, and I'll try to make the later sections in other videos a bit better. But for now, know that the music is something you should absolutely look up, even if you have no interest in playing the game. And that is it for the pros. So how about we move over to this game's cons? Yep, we're finally here. While I would just love to laugh this part away and move on to my final thoughts, that's not exactly a fair way of reviewing a game. And I always believe you should look at cons and pros if a game truly has it. And one of those games' cons is how it handles money distribution. I think that's how you say the word? I don't know. Now, unlike several other RPGs of the time, where in battles you would immediately get you money after you beat them, the money from battles instead goes to your dad, who puts it in your bank account. It's a cute concept, certainly, and I remember smiling a bit when I first ever heard about it. Unfortunately, that cuteness isn't able to save how tedious it starts to become, because instead of just getting the money yourself, you now have to go check how much something is, then you gotta walk over to the ATM, check out the amount you want, and then go back. It may not seem like much at first, but further and further you get into the game, it just starts to become more and more of a chore than it needs to. And honestly, it would have just been better to give you the money instead. This is one of those moments where I think being weird and different than other games actively hurts it a lot more, as other games would just give you the money and that would be so much better. Another issue with the game is its puzzles. Now, Earthbound itself is not a very puzzle-heavy game, but the few they do have can be very confusing and kind of out there. Like, there's this waterfall puzzle in the Mr. Saturn village, where you have to wait exactly 30 seconds in real time in order to get it to open. And I'm gonna be honest, that's really stupid. I don't hate the kind of puzzles that rely on real-world times to be clear, but it should not be used as a mainline story to make you wait real 30 seconds just to open a secret passage. That's just dumb. Another issue this game has is with its insta-kill system. Now, if you're not familiar with what this is, an insta-kill system is a mechanic that will allow you to enter and finish a battle without any need to use any attacks or resources. And in Earthbound, it's activated by being far stronger than the opposing party. It can be a great system that can relieve the toll of constant combat and item usage. Paper Mario did it, Persona 5 Royal did it, and from what I can tell, Earthbound was one of, if not the very first game to do it. However, it's honestly hurt a bit by just how much experience you get from certain fights. Some games will cut down on the EXP you get so you are not becoming an unstoppable god of destruction. But Earthbound doesn't do this, because in some battles it can open the floodgates to such insane EXP grinding that it turns the entire game into baby's first RPG killfest. I respect the idea of insta-kill systems. I myself am a fan of them when they're implemented right, and it doesn't fully ruin the experience, but it is a huge exploit that ends up making the game very unbalanced. So with that, we're at the end of the video, and now I can ask the question, is Earthbound worth playing? Yes, it's definitely worth it. It's got some issues, but there's not enough to really drag down the game's incredible level of quality. This is a game that I believe every manner of RPG fan should play. It's just that fun. My final rating for this game is a very satisfying 8 out of 10. Go out and give this a go. It's an absolute blast. And that's everything. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and like it and sub down below if you want to follow with my RPG tomfoolery. That's all, folks. Have a wonderful day.